Welcome everyone to E3 Lithium's inaugural Investor Day. We are so happy to have you join us today. For everybody who made the trip to be here in person, thank you. We are happy to share this day with you. And for all of you joining us online, so glad to have you. I'm Robin Boschman. I'm E3's Director of External Relations, and I have the privilege to be your MC today. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of Treaty 7 lands in southern Alberta. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation number 3. I'm going to get started and run you through some housekeeping items so that we're ready to go, and then really quickly here we're going to start our great lineup of speakers.
Current resources for lithium in the world cannot meet the demand.
All right. So to get you oriented to emergency evacuations procedures, in case of emergency, we will hear the fire alarm ring the bell slowly every 2 seconds, and it will increase in frequency and volume. That is your cue that there's emergency procedures happening at the venue, and we ask you to calmly walk towards the staircases that are located on either side of this room. Avoid the elevator. Then you head outside, and the muster point is just on the corner of 8th Avenue and 4th Street. In terms of the agenda today, we have opening remarks. We have opening remarks from the chairman of the board, John Pantazopoulos. We will hear from Chris Dornbos, our president and CEO. We have 2 great panels set up for you today. We first will go through our project development panel, where you're going to hear directly from the people who are responsible for the commercialization plans for our company. And then you will hear from the strategy and sustainability panel. We'll have a quick break. This is a stretching and bio break only. We'll get you back here pretty quickly. And then we will have a financial update with Raymond Chow, our Chief Financial Officer. Finally, we'll hear again from Chris Dornbos before we move into a Q&A. While we are unable to take questions as we go, we won't be able to stop and say, do you have any questions? We have a lot of time left over at the end to answer as many questions as we possibly can. And we have set up for you a question app. So all you need to do is take your phone out, use your camera app, and if you click on this QR code, this will take you to a place where you can simply input your first name and last name, and you can input all of your questions that you have as they come to you. If you are joining us online, of course, you don't need to do this. All you need to do is put your questions into the Zoom, and we will log them that way. If this QR code doesn't work for you, simply go to slido.com and enter the code InvestorDay. Can I get a thumbs up from the audience that this has worked for someone? Good, perfect. Okay, I think I heard that our video is working. Before I cue that, I want to encourage you to share any comments, any photos you have from today. You're welcome to take photos as we go. Please don't use your flash to avoid blinding the speakers. But feel free to use hashtag E3 Investor Day 23. So anytime you want to post anything that you found insightful or interesting, please feel free to do so. That is encouraged today. Okay, I will let the video play if we're ready.
E3 Lithium is a lithium resource and development company. We're looking to develop some of the biggest assets in Alberta for lithium.
Current resources for lithium in the world cannot meet the demand for electrification. If we want to successfully execute this transition, we have to develop new resources of lithium.
We're building the first lithium extraction power plant in Alberta. It's an amazing opportunity to let the world know that we do have lithium resources in Alberta.
Our resource and our process is a better way to produce lithium because it is fast, it is energy efficient, and it does not alter the brine. People People should be excited and invested in the success of this pilot because it will give them more confidence in where the lithium world is headed and to understand that Canada is in the race for this renewable energy that we're all aiming to go towards.
And we have a really good group of people who are really excited to do this and to work on it and to make this a success and to build this new industry in Alberta.
We're able to use local homegrown talent to develop the technology, the infrastructure, the workforce. It's already here in Alberta, and we have the spirit and the entrepreneurial mindset to be able to do it. So E3 Lithium is uniquely poised to build this industry here in Canada.
When you look at where we've come from and what we've been able to do, we're definitely the leaders in Canada. And so that really helps us move this project at a pace that others can't keep up at. The technology is being proven out. The resource has been well documented and demonstrated. So we're at a point where we're looking to really move this project forward to commercialization.
This pilot project is going to change the standard for the way lithium projects are built around the world. So it's incredibly exciting.
I like knowing that I'm part of what will make Alberta great in the future and will continue to make Alberta an amazing province for technical expertise and execution.
Thank you. So happy that worked and we got you guys to see that. That just shares some of the excitement that we at E3 have for the big, bright future ahead of us. Now that as we speak, we are producing lithium concentrate at Western Canada's first direct lithium extraction pilot plant. You are going to hear so much more about that today from our great lineup of speakers. So without further ado, I would like to welcome to the stage John Pantasopoulos, the chairman of our board. Please join me.
Can everybody hear me? Perfect. Thank you, Robin. As Robin mentioned, I'm John Pantasopoulos, and I have the distinct honor, privilege, and pleasure to serve as the chairperson of the board of directors of E3 Lithium. And on behalf of your board of directors, I welcome all of you, those who are able to attend today in person, as well as those joining us virtually, to the E3 first annual inaugural Investor Day. I joined the board of directors of E3 just about 3 years ago, and what an absolutely amazing journey it has been for these past 3 years. Back when we joined and when the company started, the company had a vision, quite simply to take subsurface brine and extract the lithium. Through countless challenges, through dreaming and struggling and fighting, those dreams have now become a reality. And as previously mentioned, but 1 hour north, head down Highway 2, hang a right, and you're right there. We are the first company in Alberta to have an operating pilot with DLE technology producing lithium in Alberta, which is amazing. And as a result, we are becoming the industry leader for renewables as well as the industry in the energy transition. Our team is about approximately 30 people, and let me assure you they are the best in class. I've had a chance to meet many of them and work alongside with them. Every day they are solving problems, getting solutions, working a world-class asset. I reassure you and assure you that the best is yet to come from E3 Lithium. As Robin mentioned, you're going to see many of these individuals coming up here and presenting on the stage, and they're going to talk to you about their plans, the growth, and where the company is ultimately going and the success. But before I get to do that, I get the privilege as chairperson to introduce our president and CEO, Mr. Chris Dornbos. I think everybody in this room would agree, myself included, that there is no better champion of E3 than Chris. Right from the beginning, he believed in the vision, the opportunity, and the potential of lithium right here in Alberta. There are countless challenges, as I said before, and many individuals would have said no. They would have backed down and stopped, but Chris had a resiliency. And because of that resiliency, E3 Lithium is experiencing the success that we've had. I can think of no better leader with inspiration and vision for the future of E3 Lithium, and I can't wait for him to come up on stage and introduce and show our plans for the future and how great the company is going to be in the years ahead. So please join me in welcoming to the stage our president and CEO, Mr. Chris Dornbos.
Thank you very much. Very kind words, John. I appreciate it. It has been a good, long 7 years to get to where we are today. And, it is a sign of the success that we've had that we are actually operating this pilot today. So and obviously the team is fully responsible for that development. Quickly, I just want to thank everybody for coming. We've got a pretty good show out here live. We also have a pretty well-attended virtual live stream of this event happening as well. So be cognizant of that, and I will as well as I talk through what we have to talk to today. This will also be recorded and then available online. So if you miss anything, or for those who can't join, obviously we'll have that available. So I just want to take you through a little bit of the foundation of E3 and just sort of kick off today's event. The real meat of what we want to talk about today is not hearing from me, but hearing from the people that are actually doing all the work to build this project and this company. So in 2016, the company was founded on the basis of 9 metallic industrial mineral permits in South Central Alberta between Airdrie and Innisfail. And the premise at the time was to develop a project on the backbone of an industry in Alberta that was well understood. And when we looked around the world for projects, and we started looking in 2014 for lithium and for projects that had lithium, Alberta had a lot of the advantages that a lot of the other projects did. Simply jurisdictional advantages, a mature and sophisticated industry that was already here and established, and really building on Leduc number 1, which started the oil industry in 1947, and us developing out of the Leduc aquifer and transitioning it from an oil producer into a lithium asset. So we knew the resource was real when we started it, and from that perspective, we started to really develop the technology and build upon that. And one of the things that sets E3 apart is that we've always had a clear goal to commercialization. So just taking you through some of the key points in the development, we knew from the very beginning that the resource was here. We knew that we could produce lithium from the resource. We could produce the brine. And so developing that asset from the maturity of it was at the time of the oil and gas industry and converting it to lithium was not actually that big of a job from the aspect of we understood it. But moving it towards something that you could move into a lithium producing asset still needed a lot of work. And so we continued to develop it. Thanks, Robin. We continued to develop it over the past 7 years. And the real catalyst was last year drilling 3 wells, drilling 2 and acquiring 1 from an oil and gas company and putting out our updated resources. And Peter and his team are going to talk to you today about how that all happened and what the outcome was. For us was 16 million tons M&I. And for the perspective of the audience, that's 5 times more resources than the rest of Canada has combined. So this is a significantly large resource base in a very productive zone within Alberta's geological history in the Leduc aquifer. But from the very beginning, we sort of had an understanding of how big this could be. And so we started to work on the technology. And that technology development was absolutely critical because at the time, there was not a real process that we believed was commercially viable to get the lithium out of the brines. And so we had to start looking at our own technology while we were tracking other people and their development of their technologies. Obviously, it's critical. And so from that perspective, obviously the company has come a long way. We've developed a lot of this asset and a lot of the resource and our technology to the point where we are today. And I think what you're going to hear throughout the conversation from the folks that are going to be up here on the stage is that all of that leads to the commercialization. And I think what sets E3 apart from some of our peers and what we're aiming for is that there's a real progression towards commercialization in a simplified manner that is building on the backbone of this oil and gas industry. So the staff that we have, with the lithium experience that we have gained over the past 7 years or brought in, sets us apart. If you think around the world on the size of the resources and the number of companies, there are not that many people who have the direct lithium extraction expertise that E3 holds. And from that perspective also, it enables us to do a lot of other things. We're going to talk about some of those advantages that we have. We've reviewed most every technology out there from a direct lithium extraction perspective, And I think that really has gained us a lot of experience in understanding what this asset needs to be delivered to be a commercial producing lithium hydroxide production plant. And when we look at the vision, and if you've ever seen some of the investor presentations that we do, we have this slide up, and I usually say something silly like, by the end of the presentation, you're gonna understand what this means. And I think what I'm really talking about here is exemplified by our resource base, it's exemplified by the technology and the success you're seeing. And I think the benefit you have today is that now you're not going to hear me talk about this, you're going to hear the people at E3 who are actually developing this and turning what we have in E3 into a producing asset that is globally significant. And all of that will become clear as we talk through today. So just on the broad perspective of the market, I want to give a couple of terminologies just to clear them out. The resource base, we talk about LCEs, lithium carbonate equivalent. So that's just a general terminology to understand what a resource is relative to other people. So it is lithium in the ground times about 5 to get lithium carbonate equivalent. But E3 is going to produce lithium hydroxide, often abbreviated LHM, which is 6 times the lithium in the ground. And then there's also the lithium molecules in the ground, which the people like the U.S. Geological Survey, the USGS, outline just as lithium in the ground. So it can be confusing just to compare sometimes what the different numbers are. And I think the most important thing to see, this is LCEs, this is generally how we talk about resources. When we produce hydroxide, we produce about 18% more hydroxide than we do lithium carbonate. And just that understanding, I think, is fundamental to how we discuss our resource base. So we discuss it in lithium carbonate equivalents, but we actually will produce lithium hydroxide. And so from this point forward, we're going to talk in lithium hydroxide as what E3 is going to produce. But market-wise, we talk lithium carbonate equivalent. And so from that perspective, this undersupply that you see here starting in around 2026 is fundamental to the development of this resource base and where this is going. You have to put this into perspective, in that of all of the metals that are going into these batteries, lithium is the one chemical that has to be brought on from new. So if you look at nickel and you look at cobalt, and you look at even manganese, these industries have been producing for a long time at quantities that just need to be scaled up. But you look at what is needed to bring lithium into the picture, all of this lithium has to be brought on from new, say from small increases of supply from the current producing assets. There are only 5 really truly global leaders in lithium production today, 5 big major companies. Relative to like the nickel market, which has maybe 50 to 100 companies globally producing nickel. So it does really set it apart from what is needed. And what's needed is new supply. We have to find that new supply. We have to bring it onto the market. And that's where E3 comes. And the reason that this graph looks like this is because of the announcements you're seeing globally. And you're seeing them here in Canada. The announcements of battery factories or gigafactories being developed. We've seen recent announcements. The federal government in Canada has been pushing a lot to get the industry here locally. I was just in Europe talking to a lot of the companies. There's a lot more startups. Northvolt is a Swedish startup that is now building a factory, slotted to build a factory in Quebec. And then all of the South Korean and Japanese companies that have been here for a long time. Panasonic has been supplying battery cells to Tesla since the very beginning, are also expanding production. And it takes a couple years, 2-3 years, to design and build a gigafactory, and all of those have started to be underway. So this is what leads us to this supply-demand gap, because all of those factories turn on. And when they turn on, they need lithium to put into their batteries. And so this metric done by Benchmark Minerals is really just outlining how many cells are being manufactured, what is the lithium content of those cells, and what do we need to grow, and looking at the supply side and how many companies are developing projects and what the supply looks like. And so the deficit is huge for lithium, and what it means for us is higher prices. In the initial onset of this, it means definitive customers looking for this material, and we're going to talk a lot about that today in terms of where the market is going. So, and a little bit of history on E3. This is only the last 3 years of the company. There are people in the audience here who have been involved in this story since the very inception as a private company. Some people, we had a big group of investors that are here that started working with us in 2018. So all before this graph started. And if you're involved in that story between, say, when we went public in 2017 and where this starts at the end of 2020, we traded roughly between 40 and 60 cents. And we stayed there because we needed to demonstrate to the market that we had a project that had the chance to be viably economic. And that really was outlined for the first time in the preliminary economic assessment we put out at the end of November. And you see the value of E3 increased dramatically from 40 cents. And this is on percent return. We went from 40 cents to about $1.80. And then in 2021, early 2021, went up to $5. If you look at every lithium stock in the beginning of 2021, they did the exact same thing. So there's a big rush in on lithium at that time. During that, from this sort of the start of this graph through to that point, the company raised about $14 million, and Ray's going to take you through that. And then we just started to get to work. We had the capital to go out, and we opened up a lab. We started to develop our technology at a pace that got us to commercial. We started to do things like drill wells. We drilled the first lithium well in Alberta last year. Fundamental to us being able to go out and get our resources upgraded to measure indicated. We were working with Imperial Oil since 2019. That got announced in 2022. We've been very successful at achieving government grants. The reason for that is fundamentally because we're the leading edge on direct lithium extraction in the province in Western Canada. And our success means everybody else's success. So you bring in that funding to us, we prove out the technology, we prove out the viability, and then everybody else gets to ride on that. And I think that's really important, and we've been very appreciative of all of that support. And then obviously leading up to today where we've commissioned Alberta's first lithium pilot. So just I wanted to take you through a little bit of the years that I've been here. The picture on the far left is one of the earliest I have of a tour we did with the board of directors, showing them people who had never seen Alberta infrastructure, some investors, showing them prior to us going public what Alberta infrastructure looked like. That's not our infrastructure, but just on our project site. And then obviously leading the next one right into the pilot plant. And so this is just going around the circle. We've done a lot of work internationally because this is an international challenge. Getting critical minerals into these batteries is an international challenge. And I'm going to talk to you through that at the end and some of my more recent experiences in how the world is viewing critical minerals. That's the drill bit from the first well into the Leduc for lithium. And then this is our team from 2018. The team has changed a lot. This was the entire team in 2018. You're going to see the whole team here today, 30 people, and we're still expanding. That's the drill rig from 2018, or from the first lithium well, and this is our first lab that we opened up at the university campus. And then just some other various pictures of us through the years. Bottom right is me in 2017 learning how other companies do this. This is in the Salton Sea, looking at how they're taking geothermal brines and turning them into lithium producers. The one in the plane, that's Canada's first electric plane. That was Harbour Air, converted one of their de Havilland Beavers into electric. So just a lot of work through the years to gain an understanding of this industry, to promote lithium in Alberta, to grow the team, to get to where we are today. And looking, sort of zooming in to 2023. And, you probably can go back to, our 2022, and you can actually fact check this. You can go find presentations from 2022 where I would have said that 2023 is going to be our biggest year. And the reason for that is that we knew we had some foresight to what was happening. And it really represents, and this theme you're going to hear again all throughout today, it represents a pretty significant paradigm shift in what the company is going to focus on from here on into the future. And so it started with the upgrade of our resources. These are fundamental to book reserves under 43-101, which is how we report such things. We have to book a measured and indicated to move it to reserve. So we need to do that. To that, we had to drill wells last year. So all of that was moving towards this announcement. That was pretty significant. We kicked off our pre-feasibility study. You're going to hear from Jody, who's going to talk about that today. Obviously, the pilot plant is fundamental. And I think that there's a couple levels where the pilot plant really is significant. One is that obviously it's a critical linchpin to us proving out that this has a viable chance of being a real producing asset. But it is also something that we've been talking about for a very long time, that we needed to pilot. Because this is still new technology, regardless of who and what you're doing, it's new technology. And it needs to be demonstrated at each project before you can really move that project into the normal standard course of project development. And you've seen that also in the response to our share price and the interest, even the volume in the share price. This one activity we've known for a very long time and have believed that is fundamental to our movement forward and maturation as a company. That's been supported by the federal government. We've also completed about $28 million in fundraising over the past little while to fund us into 2024. We're producing the final product using commercial technology. Josh is going to talk to you about that today. And then obviously announcements today and in the last month on the preliminary results. So a lot of stuff happening. We'll talk about Saskatchewan as well later on today. So a lot of stuff happened this year, and we still have the biggest milestones yet to come, which I think is the most exciting part. So we're going to try something here to move into the next section, and that is a live stream. And whenever you do something like this, you're always told never do anything live. But we're going to try it. On site, before we kick that off, what we want to do is we want to take you on a tour of the pilot. So we're going to roll a video taking you on a fulsome tour. We have Caroline, Director of Lithium Extraction, who's out on site the last couple of days, and we're going to have a tour, and then we're going to kick off the live stream. So first, if we can cue the pilot tour, please.
Welcome to the E3 Lithium Pilot. I'm Caroline. I'm the Director of Lithium Extraction here at E3. Today, I'm excited to take you on a tour of our pilot and share with you all the great work we're doing here near Olds, Alberta. Our first stop on our E3 Lithium tour is our E3 Lithium Brine Tank. This is a tank where we're storing the lithium-rich brine from the Leduc Reservoir. From this tank, we are pumping this brine downstream for treatment in our direct lithium extraction pilot unit. In this pipe that you see behind me, the brine's going to travel through flow meters, so we're accurately measuring the flow of brine as well as pH measurement. The other tank that you can see behind me is the tank that we're storing our lithium depleted brine in. This is where we store the brine after we've extracted all the lithium. Now we're inside the E3 lithium tent, because this right here is where the magic's happening. That Leduc lithium-rich brine is flowing in through these pipelines you see behind me. Now, very, very little pre-treatment is needed for direct lithium extraction, so the only vessels you see in behind me are a couple of filters. Through these pipelines, we're piping that lithium-rich brine down to our direct lithium extraction pilot test units, where we're extracting all that beautiful lithium and moving it into a lithium concentrate stream. This right here is my favorite part of the tour. This is the E3 Lithium Direct Extraction Pilot skid. And in this skid behind me is where we're recovering the lithium ions. You see 3 columns behind me on my left. These 3 columns are all full of sorbent that was specifically engineered to be highly selective for those lithium ions. As the brine flows down through these columns, the lithium ions are exchanged onto the sorbent material. Later in the process, all these lithium ions are concentrated into a lithium-rich product stream. Now, all these cycles happen in a fully automated way. We use control valves to move between all these cycles seamlessly, allowing us to move forward as efficiently as possible, capturing as much operational data as we can to further optimize our process and prepare for commercial design. Thanks so much for joining us here for our pilot tour. I hope you have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, Caroline. So we have Starlink, running on site. So we're going to test its ability here to run a live stream. We've got Preetham at the pilot. He's one of our research scientists that is up there right now operating for us. The team takes turns running this system. And so we'll load this up and we'll get, and I'll take you through what he's up to right now. All right. So this is live, and I'm actually somewhat surprised it's working. So yeah, thank you. So as Caroline pointed out, this is the E3 DLE skid. We do have another skid up there running as well. It operates in a similar function. So on the right-hand side, we've got the lithium stickers all over the columns. These 3 columns are full of lithium absorption material. And this runs continuous flow. So you have brine coming in from those tanks that Caroline showed you behind all of this, flowing through these columns. And the lithium molecules, as the brine flows through the column, sticks to the material. It's just a solid, looks like a little bead. But when the timing of the flow rate is absolutely critical. And we're going to talk about this in a upcoming announcement about what the flow rate really means and how we manipulate that. And how it fundamentally comes down to our project economics is how fast we can move the brine through the material. So we're flowing the brine through the material, we're extracting lithium onto the beads, and then the brine comes out with very little lithium left, and then it goes into disposal and back into the reservoir. I think what Preetham's doing here is taking a sample for our lithium analyzer. We have a specific lithium analyzer out there that we keep track of the performance. So this skid is fully automated, so it's just turning on. There's a computer control system that's telling when the valves to turn on and off to time the brine. When the brine is done flowing, we wash it off with a slightly acidic fluid that strips the lithium off, and then we collect that into the concentrate. And that's what we turn into lithium hydroxide. And so one of the key pieces of the story is understanding how the performance is moving through time, because this is a pilot. This is designed to do testing. This is not meant to produce lithium. This is meant to understand how we produce lithium. It collects data for us, and that data we use to design a commercial facility. So the result of the pilot is purely just that data. It is the performance criteria that we need to design a commercial plant. And so all of the data that we collect, and what he's doing here is a lot of the samples get shipped down to Calgary to our main lab, but he can check the performance on an ongoing basis with our little lithium analyzer that we have on site. And so the work out there is going to continue, I think, until pretty much the winter starts, and then we'll probably pause for the winter. We're gonna turn on a third skid, a second third-party company that's going to be operating as well, and then that will run through the rest of the year and into the new year, and then we'll come back next year. And the plan is right now to continue operating. And that will be a much more fulsome, mainly for the prove out of like a long-term run for project financing for our partners to see it demonstrated over a long period of time. The data we need to do the actual design will all be collected this year to get through feasibility. So I think we're wrapping up on the live stream. So can he hear us? Okay, he can't hear us, but maybe give him a round of applause. He's been a great actor. Awesome. Okay, yeah, internet, Starlink. There you go. There's a plug for Starlink there. Go get it. Okay, so we're wrapped up with me talking. So I want to bring out the smart people onto the stage who are doing all of the work for you guys. So we're going to start with the project development panel. If you can get you guys up, we're going to have Kevin Carroll, our Chief Development Officer. Can I get the slide, please? We've got Peter Ratzlaff, VP Resource Development, Caroline Moosbacher, our Director of Lithium Extraction, Josh Rubenstein, Director of Process Engineering, and Jody Calvert, Engineering Manager. And they're going to take us through a between two ferns conversation. I won't try to be exact on this one. What we're up to from the project development side. So I'm going to hand it over to them to introduce themselves and give you a bit of their background.
I am Kevin Carroll. I am the Chief Development Officer here at E3. The development is probably the most important piece, especially working with the development team. That's a reflection of the stage, again, that we are at with respect to the company and driving towards commercial development. And so I joined the team earlier this year just to do that. I am an engineer by background, primarily oil and gas, which coincidentally there may be some relevant skills for the development of this lithium resource. I've worked at integrated super majors down to co-founding junior oil and gas right here in Alberta, coincidentally, over the same project area. And so I got to meet Chris long before I hired on 3 years ago through that work. I'm excited to be here.
Hi, my name is Peter Ratzlaff, and I'm the VP of Resource Development. I'll just tell you a bit about myself too. I graduated from the University of Calgary with a chemical engineering degree far too long ago. I spent my whole career in oil and gas. I started out in the drilling rigs all throughout Western Canada. Did some engineering work, building pipelines and oil and gas facilities. But the bulk of my career I've done in worked with oil and gas exploration companies in the production operations end.
I'm Caroline Moosbacher. I'm your Director of Lithium Extraction. I'm a proud graduate of the University of Alberta in chemistry and chemical engineering, and I'm a lifelong Alberta resident. I've specialized my career in water treatment process engineering, supporting our oil sands industry, our non-conventional oil industry, and now our lithium industry.
Good afternoon. My name is Josh Rubenstein. I'm E3's Director of Process Engineering. As way of an introduction to myself, I have over 20 years experience in process and metallurgical engineering with project development, operation support, technology development, and implementation. Over that time, I've worked both in Canada and internationally, including Australia, South Africa, South America, and the US. I've also been involved in a variety of different commodities, including base metals, precious metals, light metals, oil sands. I can honestly say that my favorite is lithium, and I'm not just because I'm sitting here, it truly is the best.
Hi, my name is Jody Calvert, and I am E3's engineering manager. I started my career in Ontario in manufacturing and loved my job there. I actually became quite fascinated about watching raw materials come in the front end of the plant and watching a finished sales product go out the back end of the plant. So I'm excited to be here at E3 again to do something similar. I worked in Akeem West, and I brought my skills to work at a major oil and gas company here in Calgary. And I had quite a diverse experience there. I worked in research and all the way through to operations. I worked in conventional oil and gas and thermal operations as well as mining. So I'm bringing all those skills here to E3 as your engineering manager, and I'm excited to be up here today to talk to you about our pre-feasibility study.
Excellent. So this is the team under Kevin that is here to design and build the project for you guys. So I thought maybe, Kevin, you can start off just taking us through the overall big picture, what the process is and what we're up to.
This is the flow sheet that the team is most comfortable with me explaining. It really is simple. And so we drill wells to the brine and the Leduc Formation. As everybody knows, we've been drilling wells in this province for over 100 years. The technology is not new. We're a lot smarter and more efficient and better at it today than we were 100 years ago, but fundamentally this is no different than any other wells that we're drilling. Once we pump that brine to surface, it's aggregated at a central processing facility. And as Caroline said, that's where the magic happens. So the direct lithium extraction is the breakthrough, if you would, that is enabling the development of brine-hosted minerals throughout the world. We think we're better at it, obviously. But it's not, the fundamentals of it is ion exchange technology, which Caroline will talk about. It's been around for decades. And it's just a novel application of old technology to target and extract the lithium. The concentrate from there then goes through a refining process. And guess what? That's not new technology either. There's a number of lithium refining operations throughout the world that exist today. And so that is where we deliver our lithium hydroxide product. The brine that is now lithium depleted, all we do is put it back into the exact same formation through some more wells that we've drilled, and effectively we're displacing that lithium depleted brine to the producing wells, and so we're sweeping that to the producers, and so it's a closed loop. It's elegant. It's simple.
Yeah, and I think, given what we're doing, and we've talked about this a lot, the smashing together of some very commonplace pieces to combine into what's going to become a lithium-producing asset, built largely on what Alberta does. I mean, we do water treatment in Alberta, we do drilling in Alberta. The only thing we really don't do is that final last step of conversion. And potentially the most Albertan crew that we have in the E3 office is Peter's group. And so we'll hand it over to Peter. Your group does a lot of the work from the subsurface to the surface. Can you maybe just tell us a bit about your team, what you guys do?
Yeah, sure. So I work with some excellent people. I mean, they're a multidisciplinary team, which includes drilling engineers, completions, and production. And they're responsible for the 2 wells that we drilled and the planning of the future wells. We also have the geologist group, who I know are the best and most important people in our company because they tell me that every day.
Well, and I'm one as well.
And our boss is a geologist, so we have to honor that. They've spent hundreds of hours going through rock, including our own core that we've got from our wells, and collecting the seismic data and well log data. And all this data is collected by our reservoir engineering group, who then builds out the model and develops a resource development plan, the well network, and how we're going to produce all this. And so, yeah, obviously this is very important. So, and as you can see, the resource, it's huge. It's about 200 kilometers by 50 kilometers wide. It's about the size of PEI, if you want to put it in perspective. It's bigger. It's bigger than PEI. It's about 200 meters thick. It's got great perm and porosity. That's just a fancy way of saying it holds a lot of fluid, and that fluid can move through the rock easily. Earlier this year, as we talked about, we booked the 60 million tons, and our group was responsible with working with the QPs to were instrumental in booking that. And now we're working hard on converting that resource into reserves, and that'll be published with our upcoming PFS.
Awesome. Yeah, and everyone's working hard, including some of the extracurricular academic work that we have going on. Maybe you can sort of talk about some of the bigger picture stuff that your team's got going on as well.
Yeah, so we're working with 3 universities actually on the origins of lithium and within deep saline aquifers. We're about to publish a white paper on brine-hosted minerals and how that resource is booked here in Alberta. And then we've just been accepted in the SPE, which is their global energy conference, to present there. And so it's pretty exciting in the academic world as well.
Yeah, in terms of these deep confined aquifers, I think we're one of the companies leading the charge in understanding how lithium comes out of them and where the lithium came from in the first place. So it's pretty fascinating stuff, and stuff that we hope to get published one day as well. Maybe we'll move to Caroline. You've got a team of research scientists that we've grown over the past 3 years that have expertise in delivering the DLE solution that we have going on, as well as the pilot, obviously, which is pretty important. Can you talk a little bit about your team, who you have on your team as well? Just give us an introduction to what you guys do at the company.
I'm happy to, Chris. Within the direct lithium extraction team, we have the top research scientists. They have a strong background in geochemistry, chemical engineering, analytical chemistry, and mechanical engineering.
The importance of having this diverse background is to allow for collaboration and fast problem solving, because that's really what the lithium extraction team is. We are problem solvers, and we are learning at the fastest rate we possibly can. Within the lithium extraction team, we're working on solving the puzzle of quick lithium extraction. And how we're doing that is the innovative application of a very old technology. We're using ion exchange. Now, everyone here is familiar with ion exchange. Everyone here probably has a water softener in their home. And what we're doing is no different than that water softener that's removing calcium from the water as it enters your house, except we're using resins that are engineered specifically to be highly selective for lithium ions. It's really just chemistry, and you know what they say about chemistry, right? It's like magic, but real. And that is what we are doing. So my team has worked with the support of our E3 Lithium colleagues to take this from the bench scale through to a prototype that you'll be able to see if you visit our table later, all the way up to our pilot unit itself. And as we build, as we expand, we learn. And as we learn, we evaluate and we deliver better value for E3 itself.
Yeah, and I think that obviously one of the critical pieces of E3 is the direct extraction, is the pilot that we've got operating. And we put out a couple of recent news announcements talking about that. Very preliminary information to the market. We're going to have the full details out in due course, aligning all of the data. But maybe just, Caroline, if you can put the news announcements, the two of them into perspective, focusing on today's, what they really mean, these preliminary results.
We were really excited to get out those news announcements and share our pilot successes with everyone here. We're really proud of what we've accomplished with the pilots. We've shared 3 different metrics. The first is our lithium recovery. We've shared that we've achieved indication of 94% lithium recovery. The reason this is so critical is we don't want to waste any of that lithium that Peter's team has worked so hard to bring to surface for us. So the maximum recovery possible is what we are striving for. And 94%, that exceeded my expectations. So I am really proud of that, and I hope you are too. The other metric that we released today is our purity. We were excited to share that our lithium product stream has a purity of 80%. Now that's reflective of all the cations that are in that product stream. The 80% purity, that's really important because it speaks to the ease at which our concentrate can be refined in the downstream equipment. The third metric we were excited to share is the concentration of lithium within our product stream. We were excited to share a concentration of 916 milligrams per liter lithium. Why that's significant is the decrease in volume. So what we're really doing there is we're taking brine with a concentration of 75 milligrams per liter lithium, and we're concentrating it up to 916. What that means is it's a much smaller volume that now has to go for downstream processing. Smaller volume means smaller equipment, means lower capital cost, which means more money for us. And that's really what we're trying to make today, other than lithium.
Awesome. Thanks, Caroline. I think the combination of the direct extraction obviously is in lockstep with the downstream processing. Moving down the process stream and down the bench here, Josh picking up on that. Your team works on a lot of different aspects of process design, the most critical of which is obviously the conversion. So maybe just a little bit about who you have on the team and what you guys are up to.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Chris. I have the real privilege of leading the process engineering team, which consists of a senior process engineer, a lithium production specialist, and myself. I think this sort of characterizes everyone at E3, and the process engineering team is no different. The members are passionate, smart, and really capable. So it's a really fun group to work with. I think just overall it's really fun. Process engineering. So what is the process engineering group? We essentially assemble the pots and pans to take the resource from the E3 Clearwater resource and turn it into battery-grade lithium hydroxide. We focus on developing a flow sheet that is safe, efficient, and maximizes value. So to borrow some of Caroline's words, it makes money. the less applause on that. We focus very much on the lithium refining circuit, as Chris mentioned. So to do that, we work very closely with major equipment suppliers who design, test, supply, and guarantee the full lithium refining circuit. These are vendors that have extensive experience with lithium refining, including the treatment of DLE concentrates. So a lot of these technologies exist, a lot of these technologies have been used, and a lot of these technologies you can go and you can touch out in the field today. We also work very closely with Caroline and her team, who have been able to achieve like excellent concentrate quality. And by excellent, I mean that there's very high lithium, very low impurities. And so in the refining process, what that means is we can produce the battery grade lithium hydroxide with far fewer losses along the way. Thank you, Caroline and team.
Yeah, and similar to Caroline, we put out some news about making some lithium carbonate just today, talking about the fact that the hydroxide has now also been produced. We have some of it here. So for those in the audience, you can go find Josh's team and you can see some of the samples that are lithium molecules from Leduc Reservoir that are now in final product. But maybe just a little bit about that final step to take carbonate to hydroxide and why we're doing that.
Yeah, so along the lithium refining process, we first make a carbonate, which was the subject of an announcement a couple of weeks ago. As part of the refining process, we take that carbonate and we produce a hydroxide. And it's really exciting because this is a hydroxide that has been produced from the resource. So all of that, those lithium molecules are now in that hydroxide form.
Yeah, and hydroxide obviously going into high nickel cathode batteries, which are more dominant today in the North American market, which is why E3 is aiming towards a hydroxide product. Thanks, Josh. Jody, your team, as you mentioned before, basically assembles all of the pieces from all of the work that these other folks are doing and turns it into something that makes sense, into a cohesive plan. In project management speak, you manage stage 1 and 2 if you're looking at Alberta standard. Who do you have on your team and so what do you guys focus on right now? What are your big goals?
I think I have the best job in the company because I get to work with everyone at E3. Really, everyone up here in the panel, a lot of the other E3 employees that you'll have the opportunity to meet today, we all are indirectly or directly working on our pre-feasibility study. So my job is to wrap the commercial plant into one concept and present that in the pre-feasibility study, but I'm certainly not doing that alone. The commercial plant can be divided up into many different puzzle pieces, if you'd like to think of the commercial plant as a complete puzzle. And each practitioner, each engineer is really responsible for a piece of that puzzle, and they will spend time doing trade-off studies and looking at different options to try to find the optimum piece for that puzzle. And my job is to really wrap all those pieces into one commercial plant that will be presented in our pre-feasibility study. So you will see the work that my team is doing in the form of studies and in the form of a pre-feasibility study report. And it's been a fabulous experience to work with all these individuals to pull this together. Right now we're in just finishing the first stage of developing the pre-feasibility study report. You can divide the work really into 3 different stages. Finishing the first stage, and we're moving into the second stage of integrating some concepts together. And we are working together to put together the pre-feasibility study report that focuses on a commercial plant that is safe, technically feasible, and above all, economic.
Yeah, and the pre-feas is just really one step in the process design perspective. Maybe you can take us through sort of what happens after pre-feas, more not so much from the public perspective, but what we're doing internally to get through the next stages so we're ready to build a plant. Just high level.
So the pre-feasibility study is really the development stage of the project. After that, we move into more of the execution stage and the feasibility stage. I think a nice way to think about this is if you were developing a house, you would start out with some very high-level ideas on what that house might look like, and as you move forward to constructing your house, you define each piece of that a little bit more clearly. And so we will have a good idea of what that commercial plant will look like at pre-feasibility, but there will be more technical work to do as we move forward into 2024. And we will continue to define the commercial plant. We'll continue to develop those engineering deliverables that we need to get cost estimates and to work with vendors. And this is just a very normal process that we're using to move through specific gates as we work towards the final stage, which would be startup.
Excellent. Thanks, Jody. Just to wrap the panel, we've got about 5 minutes left. I just want to bring back to Kevin. We've heard from the members of your team and the team that they manage who are building this project. Can you maybe just talk to the audience about what excites you about this project? And you've only been here 5 months, but you've come in at a very critical point. What excites you about E3 and what we're up to?
I want to emphasize that this is the easiest question Chris has asked me in 5 months. There's two things that excite me about E3. One is the magnitude of the project and the scope of the project. As an engineer, and I'm going to say as geologists and scientists and even accountants in the room, this project is super cool. To assemble the Lego blocks and the technologies that we are in a novel and innovative fashion is awesome. But then you apply the scale of this, and it's an engineer's dream job. The other thing that excites me about this is this. It's a strategic, world-class asset, satisfying what you saw was a massive demand for a very critical material, and to be a part of something like that, especially at little old E3 here, is incredibly exciting. I get to go for walks over lunches with colleagues, with family dinners. My kids are excited about the contribution that we can make here at E3. And so I think I can very comfortably speak on behalf of the entire team with respect to that enthusiasm and excitement for what we're doing here at E3.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I mean, the team is everything. The people that are delivering the project and the company are really what is driving everything that you see publicly. Everything we announce publicly is driven by the people who are doing all the work behind the scenes. And the public sees a small snippet of that through a news announcement, but there's a lot of work that goes on in the background for each news announcement that goes out. And I think one important thing to sort of wrap on this is that, E3 being the leader in this space is cutting the cutting edge here. We're cutting the new cloth. We're building the first one. And from there, we get to be examples for our future projects. So as we expand and we grow to project 2 and 3 and 4, that we have the expertise and the mold created that we can then copy and paste to understand how to build bigger projects. And so we unlock the first one, and it's the hardest one that we do. And then after that, everything gets much easier, and we continue to progress and create that real value. And it's these people here and the rest of the team at E3 that are doing that. So maybe give them all a round of applause for coming up. All right. So I'm going to invite the next panel to come up. And this panel is the strategy and sustainability panel. So we're going to shift gears a little bit from project development mode, from the technical work that we do at E3, to some of the more bigger picture, higher level corporate development aspects that are as equally important. And so we wanted to share some of that today. So on the panel today, we've got Lee Clark, VP Corporate Development, Raymond Chow, our Chief Financial Officer, Robin Boschman, Director of External Relations, and Brian Seelan, Director of Commercial Development. I think we'll start off with each of them introduce themselves as well for this panel, and then we'll kick it off. So maybe Lee, with you.
Thanks, Chris. As Chris mentioned, my name is Lee Clark. I'm the VP of Corporate Development. In my responsibility basket, I have our environmental and regulatory practices, our sustainability practices, our external relations, although Robin is really the one that does that work, and the business side of commercializing our project and bringing our product to market, but really that's Brian that takes care of most of that. I am also, as you know, Chris, the youngest and the smartest person at E3.
Move it along.
I think I had that backwards, didn't I?
Maybe.
How do I follow up on that? My name is Ray Chow. I'm the Chief Financial Officer here at E3. My job is not only to ensure, the company's financial health and governance, but also for the planning and execution of our strategic goals. I articled right here in Calgary, spent a lot of my time in high-growth, successful energy companies, growing them from small organizations to large, complex, publicly traded ones. I spent, a little bit of time as well in the project finance world, evaluating renewable and energy projects as well.
And I'm Robin Boschman, E3's Director of External Relations. You all have met me briefly before. In my role at E3, I'm responsible for everything from investor relations to media relations. And for the purposes of this panel, I'm wearing the hat of stakeholder relations, consultation, and engagement. I have more than 15 years of experience working in Alberta's energy industry. And through that time, that experience has really spanned broad roles, but all for the purpose of developing and maintaining the relationships that a company requires to ensure that it can operate sustainably. So I'm very happy to be part of the panel today to talk more about that and the work that I do with this great team.
And lastly, I'm Brian Seelan, Director of Commercial Development. As Lee led in with, I'm responsible for the commercial strategy, negotiating with offtake and product sales and business development for the company. I started as an operation engineer for an upstream company here in Alberta, transitioned into the commercial with them for transitioning to business development with the midstream company, and then was lured here by Chris this year.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Maybe we'll just kick off with something that's of critical importance to any company that's developing a business, a project, or what have you, and that is ESG. It's a term that often gets thrown around, and I think we just wanted to talk a little bit about what it actually means and what it means to E3, most importantly. So, Lee and Ray, maybe just over to you guys to talk about the different letters of ESG and what it means to E3.
Sure. I probably should have admitted that I'm a lawyer as well, and I have more than 30 years of experience in working with major project companies, both as counsel and then as an executive helping to get big projects built here in Alberta. When I think about ESG and the sustainability, Chris, as Kevin said, I think we have such a great hand here. The cards in our hand from this closed loop, well-known system and its relatively small environmental footprint just provides such a great basis for us. When we think about sustainability at E3, we think about doing whatever is the most responsible thing to do in the circumstances, and wherever possible, minimizing our impact on our stakeholders and the environment. When I think about the E part of ESG and that minimization of the impact, we're in a great starting point. We understand how to extract brine, we know how to move it, we know how to extract the lithium from it, we know how to put the brine back. And the standards for doing that are amongst the highest in the world anywhere. We know what the target is to meet, and I know that this team, and I'm working with Jody and her team, we're all striving to exceed wherever possible those standards. So I like our hand as it relates to the environmental side of things. We take it very seriously, and we are in a good starting position with a footprint that is quite small, particularly when compared to other sources like a hard rock mine or evaporative solar in South America. On the social side, I'll say the same thing. The regulatory compact, the relationships with our stakeholders, the AER and the government have for years and their predecessors been setting high standards for that type of engagement and relationship, and ensuring that our impacts on our communities are minimized and mitigated wherever possible. The rules are well known. which is terrific. Other jurisdictions are still developing these types of frameworks, but it's all built in for us. So I'm really feel very, very bullish about the S side of ESG for us. And Ray, did you want to say something about governance?
Thanks, Lee. Our approach to governance has always been proactive in nature, in the sense of, the tone at the top is where it's set, and our base corporate policies all the way down to our code of conduct. It's something that a lot of smaller companies will struggle with as they scale up, but it's something with strong core foundational values that we stay ahead of these types of growing pains. We've been proactive in our systems and our processes, and we pride ourselves in the transparency and accountability to our shareholders. Let's be clear, we're building a company for the long term here. So,
excellent. Thanks, Ray. And I think all of these things, when you're building a project, if you start with them at the foundation, they're integrated and easily to implement as you go. It's a lot harder to look backwards and go, crap, we should have done some of these things to start off with. So having a good foot forward is incredibly important. Maybe over to Robin. As Lee mentioned...
but I'm not finished.
Okay. As Lee mentioned, stakeholder engagement is incredibly important for all projects. Community development and building those relationships with your local community. And there's a lot of people in the audience here that are local Albertans that are shareholders and probably also part of that group that we would say local stakeholders. So maybe Robin, just talk to us a little bit about how E3 thinks about these things and what our plans are in that respect.
I would love to, but Lee, first, do you have something that you want to say?
No, that's fine, Robin. You go ahead.
Okay, so in terms of stakeholder engagement and consulting with and collaborating with local communities and local landowners in our operating area, the approach that E3 is already taking is to get out there early, to get out there often, and to have real meaningful conversations. And based on my experience building large linear infrastructure projects in the province, that is really what it takes to do this well. Now, to be clear, we will not be out with a formal regulatory stakeholder consultation process until our pre-feasibility study is complete. That will provide us with the data that we need and really that the community and the landowners need to understand what it is we're proposing to do. So once we have that, we will get out there more rigorously to have these conversations with the stakeholders who are interested in what we plan to do in the area. In my experience working on these projects in Alberta, I've seen what works and I've seen what doesn't firsthand. And the things that work are really quite simple. And it is what I said, it's getting out early, it's getting out often, it's sharing information transparently, and it's really bringing this value to it of a desire to co-create what you're doing together with the community. There are so many benefits of what we are planning to do at E3. You saw in the video, we're aiming to create 150 jobs with every commercial facility, right? There's a lot to that. There's tax base, there's a lot of economic benefits to that. So there's a lot of positivity about it. And our job at E3 is to make sure that we maintain that positivity. And why shareholders should care about this is just exactly for the reason of sustainability. If we do this right, we will be able to build it and operate it for the long term, our first commercial facility, and everything after that, right? Those relationships are so important to pave the way to sustainable operations, to sustainable revenue. So I've been out in the community for the better part of this year, meeting with local chambers of commerce, meeting with local municipal governments, and including meeting with local polytechnic, post-secondary institutions. And people are really excited about how they can support building this industry in Western Canada with E3 Lithium. There's so much benefit that people see to doing that. But that doesn't just give us a pass. We have to communicate well, we have to consult well. And those are the philosophies and values that we are going to bring to the regulatory stakeholder consultation and engagement process.
Awesome, thanks, Robin. I'm going to bring back to Lee. Lee and I spent the last week together in Europe, so we're probably a bit punchy.
Punchy.
So back to Lee, just to wrap up on sort of closing the loop on ESG.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point that from our perspective, and this, I think, current runs throughout the company, we see ESG and being sustainable and being responsible not as a chore or an obligation, but as a strategic advantage. I think it's a differentiator for us. We have this tremendous base that we're operating on top of. The rules are clear. We know what we have to do, and we have a small footprint thanks to the resource. And I think that can play into and become a differentiator for us in the market for capital and certainly for offtake. And I suspect Brian can speak to the increasing focus on ESG standards throughout the supply chain in the electric vehicle world. And so I really am excited about that and like the work we're doing, and I think it's up to us to leverage it.
Yeah, 100%. And that could lead into Brian. So, we've seen the landscape change significantly over the past few years, given the global push towards electrified transport. I'm going to talk a little bit about this as I wrap up as well, some of the experiences from the last couple of weeks. But this includes seeing some of the OEMs move into the supply chain, which we really haven't seen since the Henry Ford days. So that's fundamentally changing everything about what's going on for critical minerals. Maybe you can just talk a bit more specifically about what we're seeing and what you're seeing in the industry and how that's all playing out.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time right now in the lithium industry. As we've seen in the charts on the supply and demand, this imbalance that happens in the future here, as well as what we're seeing here in terms of the amount of investment that's necessary to get this lithium into the market. And so on the base case side, this is, I think, provided by Benchmark Materials, but on the high case, that's like what you need to meet all of the government and other regulatory goals that are out there in the world right now. And so you see a significant investment, and this is, as Chris said, fundamentally made a shift in how the market is moving about getting this lithium supply. And part of that is, we talk about OEMs, you're starting to see these car manufacturers make deals with upstream companies. Like, for instance, you could use General Motors and their deal with Lithium Americas and Thacker Pass. That's $650 million. Ford is provided a $300 million loan to Lionstown. Lionstown's now been acquired. And Stellantis and a $75 million investment in Vulcan in Europe. So we're, if you want to move to the next slide, Chris, like you're seeing this shift of these companies moving into the supply chain and trying to supply themselves, because to meet the demand goals that they have and to make this transition to EVs, they need to make sure they have the supply to develop that. And that means feeding their cathode makers into their supply makers into the actual EVs themselves. And this is a representation of it, but you're really seeing these companies move down the supply chain.
Yeah, and I think it is interesting to see, because it's not just the OEMs that need lithium, it's the CAM factories. They're the ones that actually consume the lithium, and they're the ones that actually need to purchase it, yet the OEMs are buying that lithium on their behalf. And that dynamic, I think, is an interesting one. It's also something that is new to everybody in the space and potentially in some ways unexpected. But maybe we can look at the relationship side of things, because everything is about relationships. And the ones that we are building with our offtake customers are obviously pretty important. Can you talk about that environment and some of the relationships that are being developed and sort of how we see that as well, how E3 sees it?
Yeah, and maybe to echo some of the things that have been said about the people on this panel and others, is relationships are a big thing for E3. We believe that is how it's going to support our needs to get this first commercial plant. But maybe more important for us than others is building a long-term relationship, because there'll be other phases of the projects afterwards as well. And so what that means is, like, this is an international market, and we need to be out there, and we have been going on the road meeting these companies in person, but having the field pilot's been a really fundamental shift for us as well, as inviting them here. Having them come to Calgary, having them come to see the pilot, see and touch it, and have these conversations, meet our team. And I think that's been a really fundamental shift for us, and something that has really been beneficial for E3. And so building these relationships, Chris is being kind of forefront, and myself and Lee and the rest of the team here is a really big important thing. And to maybe tie this together, what we're hearing from these conversations is ESG will become a bigger and bigger thing in terms of the lithium supply. And we think E3 kind of has that advantage in terms of this DLE and everything we've talked about here on this panel. And it's been really well received by the companies we've talked to, and we look forward to continuing those discussions and relationships.
Yeah, and I think you look globally at the desire to move to electric vehicles. The ESG component, the carbon footprint, is one of the key metrics that these companies are looking at. And different governments are approaching it in different ways. The United States with IRA and DPA, sort of more carrot approach, providing funding, providing opportunities to grow, bring that supply. They also have a stick, because if you have a project in the United States, that lithium can't leave the United States. In Europe, the approach is slightly different. It's more about a stick approach. So they're pushing certain amounts of materials with certain qualifications. So, either a certain carbon footprint or a certain amount of recycled material, those sorts of things, that time frames, to ensure that those batteries that are going into the cars meet certain hurdles, like an ESG component or like a certain amount of recycled material, those aspects. And so that shift as well, fundamentally, that policy fundamentally drives what companies like us end up doing. And for example, it is unlikely that our first plant will be carbon neutral day one, but it's probably something that we will aim to do as revenue starts coming in, as we pay off the plant, and as we have capital to do that. We'll probably end up going that direction, partly because that's what our customers are asking for, and partly because they will pay a premium for that. And there are opportunities in Alberta to do that type of activity to reduce our carbon footprint. And there's new technologies as well that you can implement that are more electrical based, that allow you to control your carbon and therefore control your footprint overall. So, any final thoughts before we wrap? Excellent. We'll let this panel go. Thank you very much for coming up. So, this is you.
Can I do this?
You can.
Thank you so much. I've been trying to get this all day. Okay, we're going to have a brief break, just a 20-minute break. This is just a stretching and bio break. If you need to use the washrooms, there are 2 on either sides of us here, as well as some downstairs, and you're free to go outside and come back. Do you have the time?
Yeah, 3:40. Please be back.
3:40. Please be back. Thank you. Ray Chow, who you heard from previously, and Chris, they're going to run you through a quick financial update for E3 Lithium. We're then going to hear closing remarks from Chris, and then we're going to move into the Q&A. So Ray Chow, I welcome you up for this part. You want this? Advance back.
Test. All right, I'm super excited to be here today with you guys. I'm going to touch on some of our financial highlights and performance to date. I have Chris to my left here. I'm going to go through the black and white, the dry stuff, and let Chris provide some color as we go through our material here today. Our philosophy from the very beginning has always been to minimize dilution and keep that tight capital structure for our shareholders. Second, being very cost conscious about our capital spending, where it's being spent, how it's being spent, and maintaining a reasonable overhead. Since announcing some of our major milestones this year, a lot of eyes have been on us. We've been seeing a lot of interest in the story, and with increased interest, increased volumes, and naturally some volatility, some shorts, this is normal. This is natural as a company becomes more mature and more established. You see this with a lot of our peers in the space as they've been growing. The outcome of this and the increased volumes just means that, we've been able to grow our share price and our market cap by over 60% year to date. As planned, we were able to go out to this fall and raise the largest oversubscribed bought deal financing in our company's history. We've also been able to demonstrate the ability to tap the capital markets at higher and higher share prices and providing shareholders the comfort that we're well funded into the future. Not only has our market cap and share price increased over 60% year to date, we've also organically been able to grow our volumes from trading probably just under 100,000 shares per day at the beginning of the year to over 700,000 shares per day in the last 3 months. This provides additional liquidity to the stock, providing shareholders that upside and liquidity to buy and sell.
I think, is my mic on? one of the key things that I think is important for us as well is that as a pre-revenue company, your currency is your capital market, and your ability to continue to do what development you need to do is funded through raising capital through that currency that you've developed. And I think that if you looked around, and there are some bankers here in the crowd, and so definitely try to find some of them if you want some more detail. But I think the markets right now are pretty tough. There's not a lot of stories that are gaining traction. Not a lot of funds. Like there's still some macro market fear of recession, and certainly the postponement in reducing rates or the thought that might happen can cause market volatility and make things more challenging for companies like us to raise capital. So I think that the encouragement that we got from being able to raise capital as easily as we were able to, and the quantum that we were able to raise is a sign of sort of the interest in what E3 has been up to. And it's certainly not shared by our peers. Some of our peers are struggling right now to find that same access to capital. So I think it really does sort of shine a light on E3 and what we've been up to.
Yeah, so we're going to be heading into 2024 with a very enviable balance sheet, sitting on probably just over 40 million based on our Q2 working capital number and our recent raise. So the ability to access capital markets and grant funding, as Chris had alluded to, has been quite tough, but also successful for us. First, we've been incredibly appreciative of the support provided both by the provincial and federal government who have been there for us as early as 2019, where we first secured the Alberta Innovates grant. On the back of our preliminary economic assessment published at late 2020, we were able to fund ourselves with a $13 million equity raise with a full warrant attached, which helped quietly fund ourselves over the next 2.5 years. You didn't see any bought deal financings during that time, as we've been very cost conscious of how we've accessed the capital and spent our capital, with spending always been in line with our ability to access it. We've also been very appreciative in the investment funding from our friends over at Imperial, and with the support of the Strategic Innovation Fund, Natural Resources Canada, and our recent raise, we're well funded going into 2024.
I think that there's resounding around the board table when I talk to the directors is looking for access of capital that's non-dilutive. And I think it's important to the shareholders as well, because any dollar that comes in from one of these grants means we don't have to raise in the capital markets. And there's a rationale, I talked about this earlier, why we're getting this quantum of capital from the provincial and federal governments. And it is that if we prove this out, it opens the door. It opens the door to an industry in Alberta that doesn't exist today. And it's risky. It's really high risk. That's why we're publicly traded, is because finding private capital for this type of story is very difficult. And I think the government recognizes that risk and is supportive of us to be able to develop this industry and develop the project. So obviously, we've spent a lot of time over the past couple years working with the provincial government, and specifically on regulatory, and that has borne some pretty significant fruit in terms of Bill 82 and the AR rewriting certain directives to include brine-hosted mineral language. We've worked very closely with the federal government on their critical minerals action plan to see the development of these critical mineral assets. And in Canada, obviously they've got a broader picture of a more of a global, a Canadian ecosystem of batteries. So they want to see all the way from raw material to the final battery being produced in Canada. And they're putting their money where their mouth is on that one. And I think that E3 being a recipient of that is an incredibly important part of the growth story for the industry in Alberta.
Awesome, thanks, Chris. So over the past year, we've also been very successful in the sense of we've been added to 3 additional venture indices on the TSX. We've also been able to outperform all 3 of those indices, including the Horizons Lithium Index here. We've outperformed them by over 50% year to date. So a quick peer comparison of our direct lithium extraction brine peers. Many of these projects and companies have shown significant progress towards commercialization. As the leader in Canada, we've demonstrated significant progression through our milestones. And there's a well-worn pathway laid out by our peers that have increased their valuations, such as field pilot plants, PFSs, strategic partnerships, offtake, and feasibilities that we continue to work towards. Chris?
Yeah, I think looking at the broad market, and I was actually talking to a couple of shareholders at the break about that broad market and what's happening. Milestone, if you can just do a quick, simple analysis. You can plot E3 against our peers. Peers in the space that are here on the slide and other ones as well, and you look at where their sort of aggregate value was created. And it was things like pilot plants. It was things like corporate development partnerships, advancing their projects through some of these stages that are important to get to the end goal of being able to go commercial. And I think that is in part where E3 is performing really strongly right now. But I think that there's another component here that we don't really talk about too much because it's hard to quantify, and that is that DLE stories haven't really yet had their day in the sun yet from a market perspective. And what that really means is that we had a slide where we talked about the preliminary economic assessment validated E3. It validated that a 75 milligram per liter resource had the potential to be economic. And we put that out at the end of 2020, and it fundamentally changed the game for E3. And it unlocked the door to financing, unlocked the door to us to opening our own facility to actually demonstrate that DLE technology. And that is the fruit of all of that is being proven out today with the pilot. But moving forward, DLE still outside of China does not have a commercial example, but that is changing very quickly. There's a company that next year will turn on the first outside China DLE plant that will produce somewhere around 25,000 tons of lithium carbonate per year. And when you look at that validation from a macro sense, that has a huge piece to play in all direct extraction because it's a validation. It shows that this has the ability to become commercial at the size that E3 is talking about. That is not there today, and it's one of the big reasons why these stories often get looked at, and I think why the values aren't there relative to some of the peer companies like hard rock companies that are looking at lithium, where you look at the fundamentals of what DLE offers in terms of ESG, cost, development perspective, time frame to commercial. There's a lot of advantages there. So I think that DLE is going to have its day in the sun in the next little while, and I think that's going to have a big impact as well to valuations across the board.
Awesome. All right, well, I'm going to hand it back to you for some closing remarks.
Excellent. Thanks, Ray. Thanks for your time. Let me just find my place here. So I think one of the big things that I want to close on, and so we've talked a lot today. We've talked a lot about where E3 came from. We've talked a lot about where E3 is going. And I just wanted to try to bring this all together into more of the vision of E3 and where the big picture is that we want to take this company. First and foremost, the team, everybody here, almost everybody, there's a couple of people on vacation, but almost everybody from the team is here today to support this event. They're going to be around at various different stations during the social part of this, where you can talk to them about what they do at the company more specifically. And honestly, it is this group of people that are building this project for you guys, for the shareholders, and for Alberta. And it was a big lift to get this day together. So a big thank you to the team for coming out, and a big thank you to Robin, who you've seen. This was her event. She spent a lot of time and energy building what we have today. So big round of applause to everybody. So I'm just going to sort of summarize what you've heard today, and attempt to anyway, because there's a lot of smart people who've been working on this project. So we've heard a summary of our project development. So we talked about what it's going to take to build this project. We talked about the brine production, the similarities to Alberta. We've talked about the direct extraction, the pilot, how important that is, how that process unlocks the ability to take the lithium out of the brine.
and the success that that's having, at least preliminary results that we have out. We've talked about how we're making lithium hydroxide, which is the final battery product, and the process that it takes to get to that. We've even talked a little bit about regulatory and stakeholder. And I think that, looking at Alberta and looking at why we came here, why I was looking around the world for lithium project, why I landed in Alberta. And I have a background here, and I've spent a lot of time in the oil and gas industry myself in Alberta. But what drove me really to come to Alberta is the fact that the part that E3 is about to enter, the project development cycle that we're about to enter, we fundamentally understood there was an advantage to being here locally in Alberta to develop this project. And that really focuses around the regulatory environment. Lee talked about that a little bit. I mentioned Bill 82 that our previous energy minister got ratified and into law, and the outcome of that was rewriting the directives that the Alberta Energy Regulator here, who we now are regulated under, that include language to license the facilities and the wells and the pipelines that we need to build this project. And so we've been able to proactively get the government to engage with us to make some of these changes so that we could be ready to license and permit this project. And so there's obviously a big thank you to the government of Alberta for working with us to be proactive. But when we looked at this from a 7 years ago lens looking forward, there's the company is really, especially for the first 4 or 5 years, it was passion that kept the company going. The passion of the people involved in this that built the early days of E3 when there wasn't a lot of money to be had on the market, where we were doing things on a shoestring budget to advance the project, mainly focusing on the technology. And I think that everything that we've done today from that past, it's really built on that passion, that conviction. And that's why I'm here. That's why I do this. I think that building a new industry in Alberta is a very big thing to accomplish. And it's something that drives me every day to get up and do days like today, which started very early and will probably end very late. So I think that it's really important that that passion is felt. I think everybody in the team definitely feels that. So when you look at the sort of where we are today, we're hosting this inaugural Investor Day. We could have done this in the past, but we're doing it today because it is a point in time where if everything is successful over the next 4 or 5 months in terms of the DLE tech, which we've seen, preliminary results show success. We're working through the pre-feasibility study that's going to outline the value of this project. And all of that really means that we're moving through a bit of a paradigm shift in a critical transition of E3 from what was like a research and development company to something that's more of a commercialization company. And it's happening right now. And we had vision of this last year, and we did talk about it last year, of the need to do this and the need to get to where we are today. We have one of the largest lithium resources globally. It is well documented. We have a direct extraction process that has been demonstrated to work and will continue to provide the fulsome results to the market in due course. So you'll be able to see what we're seeing now behind the scenes. We'll get that to the market, see how actually well it's working. The success of the pilot and demonstrating the pre-feasibility study opens up our ability to grow our project and to move forward into other projects as well, but also opens up the door, as I've talked about before, into the Alberta landscape. And so it's really the culmination of 7 years of hard work by everybody that you've seen here and previous employees who were around to really get this sort of foundation set. And it's transitioning into that commercialization company that I think is really what's going to grow E3, is going to grow an industry in Alberta. And that's really truly what it is that we're doing here. And I had an opportunity to go, and I was in Europe the past couple of weeks at some industry conferences, and I was invited by the Natural Resources Minister of Canada to join a trade mission. And we did a couple of stops in London and Paris, and the third day was an invitation to participate in the International Energy Agency's inaugural Critical Minerals event that was hosted last Thursday. And it was attended by over 50 delegates from over 50 countries, either the Prime Minister or the Natural Resources or the Energy Minister or the Labor Minister to talk about, including the Secretary of State from the United States, to talk about critical minerals and the importance of this. And so what we're seeing globally, and this was a global conference, this is attended by not just the members of the IAA, but also all the invitees, and then there was another 50 or so companies that attended, including some of the biggest mining companies and oil and gas companies in the world. And what we're seeing is that there's a global concern that there's not enough critical minerals in place to transition this industry towards. We need money, and we need permitting reform. We need all of these things to get this industry. These are global concerns, and we have that advantage in Alberta to advance this without a lot of the concerns that you see globally around permitting, around social license, and it's going to be one of the big advantages for us into the future. So this is not really about the movement towards electric vehicles and the mobile electricity. This is, from my perspective, really a global mini industrial revolution, what we're trying to do here globally. We're trying to transition to electrified mobility. And to do that, we have to change how we operate. We have to build a critical minerals industry that doesn't exist today to feed the batteries that are going to enable this transition to electrification. And so it's a global effort, and every single country, including China, which are the leaders today in electrification and in electrified transport, but everyone is on board. The European Union, North America, South America, the entire world and the countries within it are working towards this goal, and it's a unified front. Everybody is working on this. Companies all over the world are developing batteries. Companies all over the world are building electric vehicles. The uptake in Europe is over 20% now of new sales. Canada and the United States are not far behind. China is well into the high percentages as well. So everyone is pushing for this. And the benefit that a company like us has is that lithium powers it all. Lithium is the one element in all of these batteries that is consistent and is used around 10%. So all batteries use about 10% lithium. So how is E3 going to participate in this? Well, we talked earlier about how important ESG is to these companies and how E3 offers that. We are in a reliable jurisdiction. We're in it based on democratic principles. So we'll develop this project responsibly, but we have the advantage, I think we'll be able to develop it also very quickly because of the regulatory environment that we have in Alberta, without having to skip steps. Obviously, we have a very strong process that is for what's the most important part is transparent. So we know exactly what we need to do to get licenses to have that ability to commercially operate, and so we can go acquire those licenses with a clear and transparent process that's well laid out by the Alberta government and the Alberta Energy Regulator. And then we have the land base and the potential to expand and really become a global player. The largest lithium producers on the planet are somewhere around 150,000 tons a year today. Now they're growing, they're going to be larger to that in the future, but that's our ability as well. We can move this project in the Bachelor District to about 150,000 tons a year. And so that enables us to really become a global player, just E3, a global player in terms of the size of the resource base that we're developing here. And that doesn't include the Rocky property and our Saskatchewan property. And I think that we have plans to develop both of those. And looking at Saskatchewan, this is fairly new to the market. We announced this only a month ago, but we've held the land since 2021. And I think what it demonstrates is that E3's eyes are around what else is going on and trying to find opportunity to do strategic M&A to grow the value of this company for shareholders. And that work will continue and probably more increased activity into the future because we have a deep understanding of what it takes to make a good project because of the skill set that we have at E3. We have the foremost experts in direct extraction, in producing brines, in large volume production. As we develop our own project, we can apply that to others. And while we plan 100% focus from our technical development on Clearwater Project 1, so you saw the project team, and that is 100% their focus, and the majority of our staff and our money that we have will go towards building that project. There's other opportunities that we can create. For example, we have the Rocky property that we have a plan to develop in parallel. And that plan involves us finding partners to develop it with, so that we can get that project also up and running while we focus on the Bashaw side of things in the eastern side of central Alberta. And I think there's also, the way that batteries are produced is also changing. And there's an opportunity as well for E3 to look at that value chain and bring some of that local. And there are some advantages to producing cathode materials and synergies with reducing costs from both sides of the battery manufacturing process and the lithium manufacturing process if you're proximal. And so there's opportunities there. And I think that the way that batteries, you have to remember that the cathode chemistries that are going into batteries today are 25 to 30 years old, and they're finally being commercialized. It takes a long time to get these technologies to the point where you feel comfortable enough to put them in a car underneath your feet. And so the same is new for new technologies. As they get developed, it takes a long time. They'll go in small applications like phones, then they'll go in bigger applications like computers, then things like scooters, and then eventually they'll end up in a car. And so new technologies that you see around today involve things like lithium metal anode or solid state. And we're working with a great company, Pure Lithium, that has a lithium metal anode, and they're developing battery technologies around that. And I think that represents the future. They claim that they can reduce the cost of a battery by 6 times. And when you talk about that type of cost reduction, and it's not switching off lithium, it's just simply the manufacturing process is cheaper because you're integrating with your lithium producer, which is why we like it. But it also has higher energy density. And so the combination of the two enables you to make batteries cheaper, which means the cars get cheaper. Now you're talking about electric vehicles that are cheaper than ICEs, and the whole industry changes. You're talking about stationary storage applications that enable wind and solar to be much more efficient if you deploy them. And so the whole world is shifting in this, and the batteries and how they're being manufactured is shifting because the industry today is well and truly very immature. The leading producers of lithium today are hard rock mining in Australia being processed in China, or lithium production in the lithium triangle in South America being processed in China. 80% of the processed lithium chemicals, so lithium hydroxide, lithium carbonate, battery quality, are coming out of China today. But that landscape is shifting, and there's a big push, especially in North America, and led by the United States, to get us off of that. And I think that we offer a very amenable solution to that problem as well. So specific vision for E3, obviously, is that we are going to refine our brines that we have here in Alberta into battery-grade hydroxide at a commercial facility, creating domestic economic value. We then plan to grow that to 150,000 tons in the Bashaw district alone, which is enough, as we've mentioned, to produce about 2.2 million EVs annually. So all of this enables us to unlock shareholder value. It's why a lot of shareholders are here today, is to look at where E3 is going to grow. And I think that we're able to, by doing all these project development activities, by looking at some strategic M&A and across our assets and across what other projects are out there, to unlock the value, creating batteries for future generations. And doing that right here, focused on our resources, focused on Alberta, creating jobs, and really bringing the value to E3 and to the province. So I told you earlier that our vision is to be a global leader in responsibly sourced lithium. And so if I can bring that home now to wrap this up, obviously the belief that the Bashaw district can produce a globally significant quantity of lithium on an annual basis, being about 150,000 tons a year, that makes us one of the largest lithium producers on the planet. And that's just E3. That's just what we have. That's just the Bashaw district. And the benefit that we have is that we can do it better, we can do it more sustainably, and we can build a world-class industry in the province. So on that note, I want to thank everyone for coming. and we're going to open it up to a live Q&A session. So I, as modern as I can be, I have live questions coming at me on the iPad here. So I'm just going to go through them in order. We have about 15 minutes or so left, and so we'll get through as many of these questions as we can. If the question warrants, I'll bring up some of the staff to do it. Maybe I'll just grab a seat and we'll bring some people up as we go. All right. So I think the first question is pretty interesting, and it's not surprising that it's one of the first that we've received. They're looking to explain the criteria of how we choose the DLE technologies that we'll test at the pilot. And we talked about our KPIs in June. Maybe Caroline, if you want to come up and give a bit of an explanation as well with me on this one, because there's a couple questions about the direct extraction. Maybe we can just spend a couple minutes going through a couple of them. So the critical criteria, and I'll get Caroline to explain the specifics, but it's really about fundamentally the economics of the project. So, you know, we've talked about the fact that we have two third-party and our technology all vying for the spot of the first commercial DLE project that will be implemented for E3. It may not be the second, and that's fine, but we need to pick one for the first project. And so it really fundamentally does come down to the economics. But we understand some of the fundamental criteria that are required that we know will make a project more economic, ideally more economic than others. Maybe you can talk about the flow rate and how that comes into play.
All right, so there are four key criteria I look for when evaluating DLE technologies. One of the ones that's most important is your flow rate ratio. And what we're looking at there is we want to understand how fast can we recover the lithium from the brine. The speed of recovery speaks to the size of the capital equipment, and it speaks to our operating costs. So the goal there is to have as high a possible flow rate ratio, indicating that we're recovering lithium as quickly as possible. That's one of the four key criteria because that speaks to the size and the efficiency of our system and speaks to our capital costs that feeds into our PFS.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when you see, there will be an announcement that will outline a full suite of what the results were for the last 6 weeks of testing. And Caroline's team is just going through all of the analysis of that data now so that we can be confident in it before we publish it. And one of the things we'll talk about in the announcement is the flow rate. So one of the KPIs we put out in June was a flow rate ratio. And what that's really telling the investor, but what it's based on is that you want to move the brine through the columns you saw on the live stream as fast as you possibly can by still maintaining a high recovery, low impurity, and high lithium content. And so a lot of the testing we've been doing is pushing the rate up to see how fast we can go before we start losing some of the fundamental criteria, and then finding that optimal path and the optimal set of operating criteria that gets us the maximum recovery and the maximum flow rate so that we have the smallest amount of capital outlay, which is the small size of plant that we can do to get the same lithium out. It's a fair summary?
Well done, Chris.
All right, thanks. I only learned by osmosis from the smart people in the room. Thanks, Caroline. Another question about imperial oil. So the question is asking that at a recent employee forum, an imperial oil senior VP talked passionately about E3. How does having the support of a large oil and gas company such as Imperial enhance the path to pilot and production? I mean, we've been very fortunate to have Imperial Oil's support. I'd say where they've been most beneficial is on the reservoir development. Obviously, that's their expertise. They used to own this asset for production of oil in the 90s.
So they have expertise, they have data, they have all of the things that a operator would have. But they also have a team of very smart people. And those people can be dedicated scientists to things like reservoir engineering, that a company like E3, our team is focused on our project, and they have a team of people that just focus purely on the science, and they're not project specific. And having a lot of people here have worked at large oil and gas companies, you know what I'm talking about. They have, a support team for all of the projects that are, usually PhDs that help the project development. And so they've been working with our team and supporting us as we've gone through the development of the reservoir that has led to the M&I upgrade. But they're just having also a group like that in the background. They have systems and processes that are in place that can assist a small company develop our own. I mean, there are a couple of critical staff members on our team that are from Imperial Oil and from that sort of education system that they provide their employees, and as all oil and gas companies do. So I think it's been pretty fundamental to what we've been doing, and they continue to be supportive to this day. So this is a good question, and I might bring Peter up if you want to join me really quick. So we had a resource out for E3 that converted downward from a inferred resource to a measured indicated. So maybe the question is why that happened. So maybe just a little bit on the information that went into M&I.
Yeah, so when you have an inferred resource, you have a certain confidence, and so when you shift from inferred going to indicated and measured, it's an increasing confidence. And so you take a big picture around the inferred, and as you become more confident and more sure of what you're doing, your reservoir, sometimes your resource shrinks. And this happens all the time when you're booking reserves, when you're going from proved to probable. And so people that have understanding of how resources and reserves work, this is not uncommon.
Yeah, really what's happened is, and that is one of my expertise as well, is you have a much more defined understanding of the porosity and permeability, the control factors of a resource. So in an inferred, it's really just a block with an average values across it. And as you get into the more detail, you're using all of and the team spent a year evaluating all the core, all the wireline logs that give us the digital data. We did a production test that informed us on some of the permeability and production values. Yeah. And all of that information is more granular. And that granularity enables you to have a much more high confidence, which is why you call it a confidence increase. So measured indicated is increased confidence in the resource. But it can generally mean that you have, as Peter was saying, that volume of available brine reduces with that work. And the question continues on here about proven and probable. And while we can't contemplate what our proven probable is, it's actually not legal. What I can say is that for booking a reserve and for moving from measured indicated to proven and probable, that generally happens in a smaller area. So you take a subset of your area, that's M&I, and you focus on that. And you have to, there's all sorts of other parameters, it has to be producible through the plant for a certain amount of years, and you can only go for 50 years of production. So we have way more than that in resource. So the reserve will be smaller than the resource simply by the fact that it's only what we're going to produce from that pre-feasibility plant that we're designing for a total of 50 years. And that's how we book what you call book a reserve. And so that number will be outlined in the pre-fees.
Yeah, in the PFS it's going to come out. And so we'll have a much higher confidence as you go forward.
Yeah, and reserves are fundamentally important. There's very few lithium reserves for direct extraction on the planet. Yeah, I know you're trying to get out of here, so. No. Thanks, Pete, appreciate it. So a question about, I think this probably came from a comment that Caroline made, and I've made a similar analogy from an ion exchange system, such as a water softener. and asking about how the impurities get reduced. And so it's not, when you look at how these ion exchange systems work, it's not so much that you're reducing impurities, it's that you're only selecting lithium. So the water softener analogy is an appropriate one because the ion exchange principles are what you're using to extract sodium out of your water if it's hard, calcium out of your water if it's hard, and replacing with sodium. So you have a hard water is high in calcium, the ion exchange medium, it swaps out calcium for sodium. So you absorb the calcium onto your water softener material and replaces it with sodium. And sodium softens the water. You don't really notice it because it's not much, but it's softened. You know, a lot of people do it to produce, eliminate scale in their pipes and that sort of thing to have a cleaner system running. So the lithium works on almost the identical principles, where you're swapping lithium for hydrogen. So as the lithium in the brine flows past this material, it swaps out for hydrogen. So you're now absorbing lithium onto the material, and the hydrogen goes into the brine. Now it's 75 milligrams per liter, so the hydrogen has negligible impact to the brine. But similar to a water softener, when that material gets full of calcium, you backwash that and you actually flush it down your drain. For us, we do the same thing. We backwash that lithium, but we keep that because that's all of the lithium now. And the only reason that we get a little bit of impurity is we talk 80% plus impurity, or 80% plus purity. That other 20 or less percent of other stuff is really coming through the fact that, you know, you have a little bit of brine left in the system and you can't get 100% of that brine out because there's a rinse step between. So you extract the lithium, you rinse, and then you extract the lithium off the material. And that rinse step cleans out all the brine that was sitting in the system so that you can get the purity. And that rinse step is never 100% efficient. And you can get a little bit of calcium scaling on the sides of the walls of the columns and stuff like that. So the impurities aren't extracting from the brine onto the material, they just happen to be in the system. And so your rinse becomes a very important step in the process of how you get purity. And one of the big pieces of optimization that Caroline's team has been working on. This is an interesting one. Could the pilot plant generate revenue? No. It probably costs us more to make the lithium than it does we could sell it for. But again, that's not the point. It is not meant to be commercial. It is meant to collect data. And that data will allow us to design a plant. And it is just also the DLE portion. There are plans in the work to look at an opportunity to bring lithium hydroxide production on the back of that in the future to demonstrate the full process locally. Again, that will produce the battery quality stuff, but even that won't be a sellable product. We'll be using that to find customers and generate interest in the project. And more importantly, as Brian and his team will be a big part of 2024 is qualification. So you have to put your lithium through into batteries for a certain amount of time before the company will believe that it's, have that sort of qualification process and the belief enough to put it into a battery that goes into a car. And that qualification process is critical, and all companies go through it. And the way that we believe that it's moving, and what we've seen is the GM Thacker Pass is a good example of being able to work with your partners directly and being able to provide the quality product from the mine gate rather than when they receive it at the battery plant, and therefore working with them on the qualification. But a big piece of this is also, and it's the same thing that Lithium Americas Corp did, is they built a demonstration plant to produce lithium hydroxide to enable that process to start. So it is a fundamental important process, and it's something that we're looking at very, very closely. Let's see if we can find one here. Maybe just a clarification. You say that you're planning on having 5 plants up and running by 2026, each producing 28 to 30,000 tons. I think that's just a misunderstanding. So we plan to have 1 plant running in 2026, hopefully, and then we believe we can scale from there to 150,000 tons, so 5 more of those over time. I don't think there's any hope that we're going to get 150,000 tons up and running, and I think that would probably cause a lot of aneurysms in our staff if we tried to ask them to do that. A good question about flow rate, but I think, Caroline, we've already answered that. A market question, this is interesting. Can you talk about how the lithium metal recycling will affect supply and demand in the future? There's actually a graph that Brian was going to put in that we didn't, and it was a good one that represents this, where the supply comes in the future. And so with lithium recycling, specifically lithium recycling, but all metal recycling, there's about a 10-year lag, because that lithium has to be produced. You put it in a battery. That battery's in a car for 10 years, which is the average warranty. And then you take it out of the car, and you may even put it into second use. So Tesla takes a lot of the batteries and puts them into their power walls. So you have second use, and that delays that into recycling. So it could be, 15 to 20 years before that battery is ready to go into a recycling plant. So when you look at when recycling starts to have a major impact, it's really not until the mid-2030s that you start to see recycling come on as a big process that's going to add to supply. But you always need that primary molecule first. Recycling is not 100%. It might be 78% recovery. Where recycling companies are implementing their technologies in, Li-Cycle is a good example. And actually Northvolt, who's looking to build in Quebec, is another example. Recycling companies are generating revenue today on scrap. When a battery plant first starts, the average is 30% of the batteries are scrap because the cells are faulty. And it takes a couple of years for that efficiency of the manufacturing process to get to the point where that percentage is in the low single digits. And so a lot of the recycling right now are taking those cells that are scrap, that are defective, and recycling them for the companies. And that's why Northvolt, and Northvolt's a really good example of a company that's looking more how the future of batteries will be produced, and not so much how they are today, is that they have the whole integrated battery chain. So they do the cathode, they do the cell manufacturing, and then they also do the recycling. So the reason that they did that is because they know that they will be scrapping a big percentage of their batteries at the beginning, and they needed a way to not waste that product and bring it back in to make the project more efficient. And so that is becoming more and more common. Companies are making money, but that real an impact to supply doesn't really happen until mid-2030s. So unfortunately, we're actually over time on the Q&A. So I just want to thank everybody who logged in to the live stream today for joining us. And this recording will be posted shortly on the website, so you'll be able to review it. Thank you, everybody, for coming in.